Hey there, I'm Natalie Topa, and I am happy to be part of this all-women's online permaculture design course. I'm going to be teaching the module on eco-village and neighborhood design. I'm going to start with a little introduction about me and how I came to care about these particular issues around placemaking and putting a there, as we like to say in urban planning. My background is actually in urban and regional planning with a focus in economic development. I got my master's degree almost 20 years ago in Colorado, but since then I've been working all over the world, and I've been based in the East African region for almost the last 14 years. And I did come here on a post-war town planning and reconstruction project after the war the 2005 peace agreement in South Sudan. So I want to back up and talk a little bit about how I came to care about the issues of the built environment. And it starts with my history, and not sure exactly, where the starting point is, but I do want to say that my family are immigrants from Eastern Europe. My father was a refugee from Ukraine and grew up in Rio, and my mother was an immigrant from Poland. And the reason that that's important is because the journey of my mother, being a single mother and a low-income single parent in the United States, manifested for me a recognition of what was missing and what was absent in her environment, to have a really full and holistic human experience. And the reason I say that is because I started to realize that, when I was going into urban planning school, first of all, that I thought I didn't care very much about sidewalk widths or building materials. I didn't understand why we were focusing on those issues when personally I was going into urban planning to focus on things like advocacy planning and radical planning. That is a bit pegged to the fact that I was brought up in the Southwest U.S. And spent a lot of time in Arizona, Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, and had a lot of exposure to Native American realities. And what that means is that, as we know, in Native American reservations, we've got a lot of sort of dumping of different types of activities like nuclear waste and casinos. And so I was compelled to go into urban planning thinking that I would be able to make a difference socially. When I arrived there, people were talking about things that I thought were abstract and just not very worth really focusing on. But when I started to realize that the human experience is so tied to the built environment, I realized that every place should be built for someone like my single, low-income mother, which means that she should have access to dignified and equitable economic opportunities at a living wage without traveling for 2 or 3 hours in commuting every day. She should have access to public transit that is affordable, reliable, convenient, and safe. She should have access to affordable housing that isn't in slum conditions and dilapidated conditions. She should have access to healthy food, fresh foods, and not be economically so marginalized physically that she finds herself in a food desert. And she should have access to sort of the 5 daily errands, as we say, things like coffee, a newspaper, sandwich, dry cleaning, daycare, whatever that might be, that are, aside from home and work, what a human being has to run around and do. And then lastly, she should have a place that she can go with her child, a place that's safe and beautiful and comforting and enjoyable, where a child can play, a mom can read a book, and even in the urban design, a place that a mother who gets off of a bus, in the rain or in a winter, can have a child on one hip and a bag of groceries on the other, and not have to walk, miles to get to her residence. And so that's all about that placemaking element. How do we how do we express those conveniences and those elements into a physical place? And so that is when I really began to care about physical planning and its relationship to socioeconomics, ecology also, because what is the relationship between the built environment and the local ecology? So I want to do this module so that we can, as I like to say, we can change your mental SIM card about placemaking. A lot of people go into permaculture and get so excited about the notion of living on a homestead and making their own food and growing their own food and home food processing and livestock. And I get you. That is very exciting for me too. I live in a 5th floor apartment here in Nairobi, Kenya. And I've had to sort of fit all those things into what I call my 5th floor farm. I have chickens here, I do vermicomposting, I raise micro livestock, I've got black soldier fly larvas, beetle grubs, earthworms, mealworms. I'm starting mushroom production, spirulina production, I do a lot of sprouting and fermenting. So I'm homesteading in my tiny little space up in the 5th floor apartment in Nairobi. But I say that because not everybody has the time or the resources or the courage to jump out, buy a piece of land, and develop it, make a village, a co-housing or intentional community. And so what I want to do is talk to you about 2 different things. One is, how do you make a village where you are? What kind of actions can you take? How can you mobilize people in your community? And what are sort of the key things to focus on that start to create that cohesive village feeling, both in terms of physical environment and the social environment? Because why do we like eco-villages? What is it about an eco-village that compels us, that is inviting and that's exciting about maybe wanting to move into something called an eco-village? Is it the eco or is it the village? Are we compelled by regenerative lifestyle that's more connected to nature, where we can have fresh organic food, and participate in carbon sequestration and trying to reverse damage to our environment? Or is it the village part? Is it about connection and togetherness with other humans and people who are at different points of their lives, elderly, children, and being part of a cohesive unit or context where you have the social elements of support and growth and that social capital, which is actually a driving determinant in resilience, which is the work that I do. I failed to mention that I currently work with refugees, displaced communities, and host community populations in about 10 countries in East Africa and Yemen. And so, when we talk about resilience, there are many elements to resilience. Governance, good governance, gender equity, ecological restoration, economic health, financial inclusion, market systems development, livelihoods. But at the core of that, people are not as resilient if they lack social capital. And what that means is connection to other human beings who can help them to aspire to new heights, to introduce ideas. It's what I call mouthbook. It's kind of like Facebook, but without the internet bandwidth. So we need social capital in our lives to reduce our vulnerability for a lot of reasons. Encouragement, we need encouragement. We need someone to sort of give us a little push to be bold in the things that we want to do, or point out some strengths and attributes that we may not see in ourselves. And so being part of a village also offers that. So there's the eco and there's the village. You could almost say the physical and the social. I want to talk about how do you do that where you are right now, wherever that is. If you are in a high-density urban environment, we can put a there, right? A village can be created in that context. If you are in a cul-de-sac, in a suburban situation, if you're in a rural area, or whether you actually are able to set out and establish an intentional community with fellow like-minded people who are interested to do the same. So I'm going to cut the intro video here, and then let's move on to the next section, which is on neighborhood design. Thanks.